So thanks and welcome everybody for being here again with us. This is the third session of this series, India and the Spanish-speaking diplomacy. Conversation with diplomats in the time of the coronavirus. I always say that we started this during these difficult times of the pandemic, but that we hope, there will be an excuse for continue even after the pandemic is over, and I hope that will take place in not such a distant future. That's our desire. As I've been saying, the aim of these webinars is to know the background of diplomatic relations between India and the Hispanic world, to know the present state, the future expectations, and the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic in the different countries. But why India and the Spanish-speaking countries? I was just reviewing some of the figures of the Spanish languages just before starting this session. And it is really, we are, 58 crores of Spanish speakers all over the world. There are 21 countries, Spanish-speaking countries. We are the second language in terms of native speakers after Chinese, and the third language in total number of speakers after English and Chinese. Spanish-speaking people are exactly the 7.6% of the world population. And we are the second language of international communication, and the second language in Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. The numbers of Facebook are quite interesting because Hindi is the third language. English is the first, of course. But it means that if you learn Spanish being a Hindi speaker and you know English, you will have access to more than 80% of the content of Facebook, which is really incredible. No? The GDP of Spanish-speaking countries, it is 6.9 right now, no? And I would like to say that such a big continent, an important continent like America, when I say America, I don't mean the United States of America, but I mean the whole continent, if you speak properly. And it's a continent that basically speaks Spanish, with few exceptions in English and Portuguese, we'll say. But you remember that in the States, there are more than 40 million of people speaking Spanish. And the number is growing. So you can have an idea of the importance of the Spanish language and the importance of the Spanish international relation, which is just growing. And today we have a country, which is Mexico, which is the country that has the highest number of Spanish speakers in the world, much more than Spain. And you are with more than 100 million, you have the honor of being the most populated Spanish-speaking country. And as a Spaniard, we are very proud that we are no longer owning Spanish. We are, I think, maybe hardly reach the 10% of the Spanish-speaking population in the world, but we are very proud of that. We are really happy, Our language now has many accents. It's a very rich language with different words for different countries. And for me, it's a great honor to have today with us Ambassador, His Excellency Ambassador Federico Salas from Mexico. I would like to give a brief acquaintance. Ambassador Salas has a bachelor and a master's degrees in political science. He is a career diplomat since 1989, and he rose to the rank of ambassador in the year 2000. He has been Director General of international organizations. He has been advisor to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, head of political affairs of the Mission of Mexico to the United Nations. He has been also head of political affairs and relations with the Congress at the Embassy of Mexico in the United States of America. He has been General Coordinator of Advisors of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador of Mexico in the Czech Republic, Israel, and Indonesia. if I am not wrong, just before coming to India, and I think you've been in India, we came almost at the same time last year, and he was permanent representative of Mexico to the UNESCO. So welcome, Ambassador Salas, to our webinar. And with much further ado, I would like to ask you to begin our round of questions. As you know, the participants will be also asking questions, and we will combine, you know, the questions of the participants with the ones that we have here. And the first question will be that this year, if I am not wrong, Mexico and India are celebrating 70 years of diplomatic ties. Could you tell us how it all began? Are you planning any major event to celebrate it?
Yes, well, thank you very much, Oscar. First of all, let me say how grateful I am for the opportunity to participate in this webinar with you and with the Cervantes Institute, and you and your team. We have a very good and constructive relationship, and I'm very happy to be here today. As you said, you know, I mean, all these figures that you cited of the extent of reach of the Spanish language around the world, and the fact that Mexico is indeed the largest, the country with the largest Spanish-speaking population in the world, for which we're very grateful, you know, to the Spaniards for that very constructive contribution to our culture, amongst many others, certainly. Let me tell you, coming back to the question that you've asked, I think it's very important that indeed this year we are celebrating 70 years of the establishment of diplomatic relations between Mexico and India. We were the first Latin American country to recognize independent India. This was in 1950. In August, actually, the anniversary is coming up very soon. And it's been, you know, some 7 decades of a very close and very constructive relationship since that has taken place. As we were, of course, had great ambitions as to the many things that we wanted to do this year, but you know, we didn't know that we were going to have this virus coming at such a time and creating problems for the opportunity to do some things. But nonetheless, I must say that I think that from our point of view, we started the commemoration of this very important anniversary, actually not into 2020, but into 2019 in late November, early December, with the participation of India as the guest of honor in the Guadalajara International Book Fair, which was a very important event. As you know, the Guadalajara Book Fair is the second largest book fair in the world and the largest in the Spanish-speaking world. So to have India participate in that was a very important event. We had not only Indian writers and publishers that came to Mexico to participate in this, but also a wide array of other cultural manifestations that came from India for throughout the duration of the book fair. And then later on, some of them stayed on in Mexico and went to different places, different cities, not only in Guadalajara, to perform dances and music and different things. So that was, I think, how this began. And then, of course, we had you know, many plans for not only of cultural events that we wanted to have take place this year, but also some political and economic and other events that we thought could give greater importance to the commemoration of this anniversary. Of course, as I said, we had we couldn't continue doing this, but nonetheless, we're still planning to do some of these activities now reconverted into this kind of forum, and in other words, the virtual medium, which is what is now becoming the normal way of doing this. And as we were saying before this talk began, I think one of the things that we were thinking of doing, for example, like we did last year, which was an encounter of Mexican and Indian writers and poets, and that we could probably, we certainly can do that in a virtual meeting like the one that we're having now, and other activities that we hope that we can carry through, and probably in the later part of the year. We still are hoping to have some exhibits that maybe that can take place while we're here. On the other hand, when it comes to some of the other issues of political and economic nature, I must say that in spite of the pandemic, at least the contacts have continued to take place between Mexico and India, and that is a very important thing that takes place. It is unfortunate, as I said, that we could not have either mutual visits or some high-level encounters to signal these events. We were hoping, for example, to have the foreign minister of India to come to be in Mexico in August, precisely during the commemoration of the anniversary. That, of course, is not taking place. But nonetheless, I think that we're going to make it as important as we possibly can. We're also thinking that one last thing that I want to mention is to have a publication from our academic academy in Mexico with some texts of Mexicans and Indians talking precisely about the importance of the relationship and the history of the relationship, and so that we'll have a kind of a document commemorating the anniversary.
Yes, I am sure, Ambassador, that the pandemic has completely changed the plans that you had to celebrate these 70 years. I remember meeting at the beginning of the year with yourself and telling me about several things. But okay, let's adapt to the new normal. And let's remind that that is an oxymoron, with all the dangers that oxymoron they had. And let's see, I'm looking forward very much to do this edition of the Ibero-American Voices in a digital format, and I think we can do lot of things very, very, very appealing.
Yes.
As I would like to say, you mentioned visits between India and Mexico, no? Watching at the relationship between diplomatic relations between Mexico and India are quite impressive. I think many prime ministers from India have been to Mexico, starting from Nehru, Indira Gandhi, Rajiv Gandhi, Manmohan Singh, and the latest, of course, was Narendra Modi, who visited Mexico in 2016. And
That's
during
correct.
his visit, it was decided that the two countries would convert the relationship from a privileged one to a strategic partnership. What's the meaning of this in political and economic terms? What means that new strategic relationship between both countries?
Right. Well, I mean, this is terminology that is used in the diplomatic world. I think just to highlight the level of importance and closeness, and I guess the frequency of contacts that exists between two countries. But certainly, when Prime Minister Modi was in Mexico in 2016, it was the reaffirmation that we have a privileged relationship. And for us, that is a very important thing, because in spite of the distance, and many people say, well, Mexico and India are so far away from each other, but nonetheless we have a long history of very close contacts that goes back even centuries. But even not having to go all the way to the past, as you said, during the independent life of India, the high-level contacts at the presidential, prime ministerial level have been very frequent throughout all of these decades. So we really have had a good deal of communication and contact and working together, not only in the bilateral field, but also in multilateral organizations. And which is a very important point and a very important aspect of the relationship between Mexico and India. Now, the idea of advancing the relationship from a privileged to a strategic relationship, of course, is so as to bring it so that at the highest level of contact, that is prime minister and president, and have, you know, a larger multiplicity of areas of our respective governments and societies interact with each other, which I think is a very important, because it's already happening, it's taking place, and but we need to have it more streamlined, more formalized, without making straitjackets to it, but having it more more focused to achieve the goals that we both countries want to achieve. Now, one of the things that has happened in the past, not only in the past 4 years since the prime minister was there, but I guess in the past decade, is that Mexico has become the largest trading partner of India in the Americas, in Latin America, I'm sorry, second only after the United States, in the whole American continent. And that has been certainly a very important development. And India has become one of our top 10 trading partners in the world.
Well, I think it's even more so when I think at the beginning of this century, the economic relations were almost negligible, no? That's been
That is true. No. It's I mean, the growth has been, quite impressive at a very fast pace. And even though now, of course, we've had this slowdown because of the pandemic, we're very confident that things will continue to grow in terms of the economic relationship. We also have a large and a growing number of Indian businesses that are setting up shop in Mexico. It's a very important development. I think over 120 approximately Indian companies have investment and presence in Mexico in a wide variety of fields, from technology to food, fertilizers, you name it. And we also have a large number of Mexican businesses here in India, which of course maybe not as large as we have in other countries, like for example in Spain or in France. But when you compare, our presence in the rest of the world, this of course acquires a greater significance. So in other words, the point I'm trying to make is that the relationship is a very rich one, it's a very solid one, it's a growing one, and to turn it into a strategic relationship will basically be used to highlight the importance of this and streamline the frequency and the closeness of the relationship.
So you have answered one question, put by a student. I will mention his name, but I think that I take the question as answered. But Siddharth from New Delhi was asking how would the relationship between India and Mexico in coming years from the point of view of business. I think that question is already answered. The incredible growth of Mexico as economic partner to India, it's there, and we hope that will continue. Allow me to put another question related to institutional relations by let me see who is asking this. I don't have the name here of the person, but it's saying that several countries, including India, have called for reforms in the World Health Organization to make it more transparent, accountable, and balanced. What is Mexico's position in regard to the performance in dealing with the COVID? What kind of changes would Mexico like to see in the working of the World Health Organization?
Well, certainly it's a very good and very timely question. I think that we're really very much looking forward to to working in the World Health Organization in the upcoming years, because as you know, in the past, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, India became the chairman of the executive board of the World Health Organization. It's basically India right now is presiding over the executive branch of decision making in the World Health Organization, and will therefore have a very decisive role in the future of this multilateral group. In Mexico, we are of course quite aware that not only the World Health Organization, but many of our multilateral organizations in the multilateral system need some upgrading, need some reform to make it more accountable, more transparent, more efficient. This is the case across the board when you look at the organizations of the UN system, multilateralism in general, but we look at it as something of an opportunity rather as a negative aspect. I know that some of these organizations were, when they were founded, when they originated, which was a few decades back, the world was a very different one. And some of them have been very slow in adapting to the changing conditions of the international community. But that's where we come in to try precisely to make them more useful and more responsive to the needs of the world community today. And those needs, of course, have changed. We have to identify what has changed and what will work better to address these issues. I know that the WHO has been under tremendous criticism, while at the same time it has also been a very useful organization in terms of guidance during this pandemic. So it's not all negative. But nonetheless, I mean, there is room for improvement, and we hope, and this is an aspect where we hope to be working with India precisely to achieve that.
You are absolutely right, and I think the reality is changing too fast, and institutions
Yes.
cannot cope with this speed of. I mean, we know that the world it's in I mean, the speed is really incredible. Things are changing, and institutions, take longer to change than. I have here another question, if you would like to take, from
Please.
Professor Anil Dhingra, which I salute here and welcome. And he's asking, because it's related to the topic we are now discussing, what is Mexico's stand on India joining the nuclear supplier group?
Well, during the visit of Prime Minister Modi to Mexico that we referred to earlier in 2016, we made a statement. The President of Mexico made a statement when both the President and the Prime Minister held a press conference that we were going to be supportive of India.
Very good. And we'll move ahead because, many of our audience here, they're students, and we'll move to other kind of subjects also. Questions are coming, I'm just putting them. But one thing that I always thought it myself, and I think is of more general and cultural nature, and it is that it is often said that India and Mexico have striking similarities in the diversity of their natural landscapes and people.
Mm-hmm.
Both are heirs to a great cultural heritage and share a colonial past. Could you elaborate on these natural and cultural affinities? Because I think they are both natural and cultural. You have all the climates are there in Mexico, like in India.
Yes.
And the diversity of Mexico is a country that I know it's really incredible, and like the diversity we have in India. Could we say that both countries exemplify that of unity in diversity?
I would, absolutely. I think it's, there are many similarities in a general sense. I don't want to overdo it and say, and kind of push it too much. But nonetheless, for example, we're two large countries with, of course, Mexico has a population of 120 million. India is 10 times, a little bit over 10 times that much. Mexico has 32 states, federal states. India also has 32 states. But I mentioned this number because it's interesting, and this is something that I've learned since I've been here in India, how each region has its own richness in terms of food, in terms of traditions, in terms of cultural manifestations of different types. And the same thing happens in Mexico. Wherever you go, whether you go to the south in Oaxaca or to the central part in Michoacan, etc., you will find very specific traits of the crafts that are made there, of even the languages that are spoken. Even we have I believe it's something like 60, 65, 68 languages that are indigenous languages that are spoken in Mexico. And that is something, again, that is somewhat similar to what happens here in India, although the numbers here are also much higher. Both Mexico and India, of course, are also ancient civilizations, and I think that this is a very important trait. We're very proud countries in that regard. We also both went through a colonial period, which of course has its downside, but at the same time has an enormous contribution in terms of richness of, certainly in the case of Mexico, cultural richness that we're very proud of. And you know that the Mexican population today is the nature of the Mexican population is a mixture of the indigenous population with the European, mostly, basically Spanish population that came to at the time of the conquest and then during the colonial period. So about 90% of Mexican today are mestizos. It's a mixed race, and we're very proud and very happy with that. And I think that there's one aspect where I think really highlights this similarity between Mexico and India in terms of the cultural richness, both of the historical, the archaeological, and the natural. Because as you know, in UNESCO, where, as you correctly mentioned, I was formerly the Mexican permanent representative to UNESCO in Paris, they have the list of World Heritage Sites. And Mexico and India have almost the same number of World Heritage Sites, which is 35 and 36. I remember it was last year, around this time, at the end of June last year, in Baku, in Azerbaijan, that I believe it was Jaipur became a World Heritage Site. And therefore, India had one extra site ahead of Mexico. But this, I think, is very emblematic, that we both are countries with almost the same number of World Heritage Sites. And by that, it means, places which are of historical importance or of archaeological value, or natural sites also, natural reserves, places like that. I think that's very significant.
No, you are absolutely right, Ambassador. I mean, I've been both to India and Mexico, and the heritage of both countries is really astonishing. It's
Yes.
really breathtaking. It's something that you wonder, and about the contribution. There are many questions, but we will be focusing now. I will just to take one related to the topics, trying to ordering them according we grow in our conversation. There are all kind of. And this one, because it's just related to the topic we are talking now, which is more culture and cultural affinities and similitudes. And this is from our friend, who's also a teacher of Spanish at IGNU, Vikash Singh. He's doing an incredible job. And he's saying that many of the similarities are not coincidental, but are due to historical links that have been established since the 16th century, he says, Vikash Singh, And he is particularly interested in knowing about the legend of that girl from Gujarat who arrived at Mexico in the 17th century. I think she was called Catarina de San Juan, if I am not right, the Princess Mira.
That's correct. Yes, yes.
Can you say
yes.
something about that? No, that obviously attracts the curiosity of Indian people to know that there was this princess there. What you can say, what is true and what is just fiction or legend?
Well, at this point, it's not a question of whether it's true or not, but this, legends, have taken hold and are as true as they are because people believe in them. It was, yes, the case of, at the time, back in the 16th century, where there was a great deal of contact and communication between Asia, understood in a very general sense, and the Americas, but particularly with Mexico, and the so-called Galeon de Manila, the Manila Galleon, so-called because the last port of departure before crossing the Pacific was Manila, Philippines, and then went on to what is now in Acapulco in Mexico. And that created, it's amazing because when you think about it, we're talking about 5 centuries back, an enormous link of communication and trade between this part of the world and the Americas. And it is believed that some people, it was not only goods that were being taken back and forth, but also some people from India and other places were coming to the Americas. And it is believed that in one of these galleons came this woman, Catarina de San Juan, as she is called, or also known as Princess Mira from Gujarat. And she came to a convent, to live in a convent in the city of Puebla, which is, of course, in a Catholic convent in the city of Puebla, eventually converted to Catholicism and became a Christian, which of course was a controversial issue, on both sides. So, but the one thing that is very significant is that as far the story goes, that because of the dress that she wore, which were very colorful and very ornamented, she had and this type of dress became excuse me, a very typical and emblematic dress in Mexico, which is now we consider to be a very a traditional dress of Mexico, and we call it the China Poblana, which is the Chinese person from Puebla. Of course, in those days, many of the things that were coming from the east were said to be coming, were Chinese. It's sort of like, regardless of whether they were from India or from the Philippines or from Japan or whatever, which of course it was all seen as one entity called China here in the Far East. So that's why she's called the China Poblana, and you see that, as I said, nowadays, that this traditional dress in Mexico, which is as I said, it's very colorful and very loaded with with the bracelets and shiny sparkles in the dress and different colors in the dress. We consider it to be a very Mexican thing, but of course the origin is clearly coming from this part of the world. Yeah.
Very interesting. And before going more into culture, because questions are many questions about cultural diplomacy between Mexico and India, but I would like to take one question, which is from Max. This is Max from Mexico. So from one of, and he's a Spanish teacher in Andhra Pradesh. So, and a few weeks ago, he said that he read an article. It was saying that the Spanish is one of the languages of the future. My question is, what do you think are the challenges for the countries in Latin America for this century? It's a very broad question, but if you could answer quickly, what do you think? And then we'll go back to culture, but just and the main challenges for Latin America in this century?
Well, I think I will say that there's two main challenges. One of them, of course, is to the whole issue of economic development, and by that I mean, consolidating social development, bringing people out of poverty, and having all of our countries develop in a more with looking towards a more brighter future, economically speaking. Of course, with this pandemic, we've all been thrown back, quite a bit. But I think that was before the pandemic, and of course, it's now even more so a major challenge. And secondly, the second challenge has to do more with a political and social aspect, which is to consolidate our democratic credentials across the continent, the Latin American continent. I think it's very important that I think all of our countries for the past decades have been striving very much to consolidate institutions and to really have very solid foundations for democratic development. We've had setbacks in some countries, or actually in all of our countries in one way or another. But I think it's very important as we move towards the future that this combination of a more democratic, more open, more transparent societies, because that's how we are, paired with economic development. It's something to look forward to, but it's a big challenge, and that's something, that's where we are.
Thank you very much. I will just now put a couple of questions together. Actually, there are many questions, and I am afraid I won't be able to take all of them. I really apologize for that, but time is running fast. I think we should, before going into culture, I would like you to say a few things about, because I think I have several questions regarding that. I know that it's a delicate question, but we would like to know, about the COVID pandemic, how it's affecting Mexico, and what do you think in general? What are the prospects for the next weeks, and how Mexico?
Well, it's hard to be optimistic given the situation as it is right now. It seems that as they call it now, the epicenter of the pandemic has come to Latin America. I would probably say, it's not so much to Latin America, but to some developing countries, because I think that unfortunately India has to be included in this package. And I say this because I think that both Mexico and India are in somewhat of a similar stage of the situation of the virus. In other words, that the numbers are growing, both in terms of cases of people that are getting infected, in terms of deaths, which is something similar to what is happening here in India. Of course, the situation for me in Mexico is more worrisome, because our numbers, you have to take into account that we're 1/10 of the population of India. So proportionally speaking, the percentage of the population that is being affected is much higher than it is here. But at the same time, we're, as it is happening here in India, we're at a stage where we're beginning to open up the lockdown, which is what's been happening here in India in the past week or so. It's also happening in Mexico. And I'm not exactly sure, to be very honest, how to explain this or what the consequences of this will be. In other words, that at the time where we're opening up the economic life and releasing the restrictions of the lockdown, it's precisely at a point where the numbers of infections and deaths are increasing. In other words, we have not reached yet the peak of a curve, so that we can see that we're sort of on the other side of it, to see a decreasing number of cases. So of course, aside from the very sad reality of the tragedy in terms of human lives that this has taken, the economic impact in Mexico has been and is severe. We are expecting to have negative numbers in terms of growth, and of course, this is affecting. The Mexican economy, like the Indian economy, also has a very important informal sector. So many people, have not been have been out of a job, or were not able to sustain themselves at a time of a lockdown because they're live on a day-to-day basis. So the impact of this is going to be very serious, and I hope is not a very long-term one. That we will be able to overcome the negative aspects of it in a gradual fashion, but not overly extended.
Thanks. And before moving ahead, one last question regarding this: how the pandemic is affecting education there. Schools are going to open, they are closed, because that's
schools have been closed. The Ministry of Education had the idea of reopening them in July, but I am not sure that is going to happen. It depends very much on how the rate of increase in the numbers continues to be, Oscar. So we're really kind of holding on to see how this will continue. I know that, of course, like in many other parts of the world, classes have continued in a format like the one that we're having now, but of course, it's not the same thing. But no firm decisions have been announced yet in terms of what is going to happen. I guess after the summer, and whether in the fall, classes will resume in all levels of education.
Thanks. We are also expecting here in India, no? And as you know, it affects the activities of the Cervantes, and it affects the life of all of us, although we have moved all our teaching to digital means and online means. Well, now let's move from the COVID. And as I said, I have here, I will try to pack several people into one question, because the question is similar, and it relates to cultural relations between Mexico and India. No? Let me quote the people. This is Shivansh Harish. He's a student of foreign languages from Manipal University in Karnataka.
Okay.
And he's studying Spanish, German, and Polish. And he says, how strong are diplomatic relations between India and Mexico in terms of cultural diplomacy and exchange of students? Don't answer yet. Let me pack together several questions, otherwise it will be very difficult, to take care of all these. No? We have here another similar one, and let me mention, she is Meghana. She's a professor of Spanish and a student of European studies. I don't know where she's from in India. She's not mentioned, Meghana Manga, and she's asking also, wants to know, a summary of the cultural diplomacy between India and Mexico, cross-cultural exchanges, and also about the image perception of India in Mexico. And sorry to make these long questions, but they're all similar, and I think you can tackle them together. And we have another here. I'm quite happy about that, because I didn't know. I just come to know now. It is from Mr. Rafael, chairperson of the Indian-Mexico Youth Forum. I think these are a group of students from, I don't know if they are from Delhi University, he's not mentioning. And question is similar. What role do you think the youth of India as well as Mexico play in promoting the relationship between both countries? And what can we do to promote? So basically, the questions all are about cultural relations between, and the role of the youth, which I think is a very interesting question. What can be done in exchange?
Well, first of all, I mean, I didn't know that there was this what did you call it? The
Mexico
India
Youth Forum.
Youth
India
Forum.
Mexico Youth Forum.
Okay. Well,
There is an
whoever that is.
India Spain Youth Forum also. We had a webinar yesterday with them.
Oh, good.
And I think it's very interesting to get in touch with all these people.
Well, I would very much like to get in touch. I will ask, invite the people that are in this forum or whoever is coordinating it to get in touch with us at the embassy. We'll be very happy to talk to you and see, what you guys are doing and how we can collaborate and work together. The cultural relations between India and Mexico, I think, are very rich. We've had a large number of exchanges in the past years, and we certainly hope that this will continue as we move on towards the future in all sorts of aspects. And this goes also back. There's a historical aspect of it, as was mentioned earlier. I mean, we've had important artists from India being in Mexico, participating in different types of activities in Mexico. And of course, we've had our share of people that have, from the cultural world, that have also worked and lived here in India. And aside from, what the embassy does in terms of promoting exhibitions and forums of different kinds, promoting the publication of books that are of interest to both countries. We have important participation, for example, in the book fairs or the literary festivals that take place here in India. Actually, one of my last public activities before the pandemic was in the Kolkata book fair over there, which I think was a very impressive event. And we had a Mexican writer, Juan Pablo Villalobos, was there participating in the fair. And so these are the type of things that we promote, that we like to do, that we'll love to see much more of, certainly, and to bring more of the Mexican culture to India, and of course bring some Indian culture to Mexico. There was one question as to how Mexicans see India, and this actually brings me inevitably to Octavio Paz. Octavio Paz, which I'm sure all of you know, was I am very honored to be his successor as ambassador of Mexico to India. He was ambassador here in the late 60s, and then was of course he's a very eminent writer, winner of the Nobel Prize in Literature. And one of the things that is very remarkable in his work, of course, is his works on India, the things that he wrote about India, which later went on to have a great deal of influence in his work. And I think that it is through the works of Paz that a lot of Mexicans became familiar and more knowledgeable of Indian culture and Indian religion, Indian traditions, and Indian literature, certainly. And that, I think, that was a very, very important aspect of it. So I think that in Mexico there's a great deal of fascination as to what is happening in India. Probably not so much is known when you get down to the details. The same way that here in India, sometimes Mexico is seen kind of somewhere out there on the other side of the world, but the specifics are not very clear. It's kind of a blurry vision. And this is something also that I hope that as ambassador here, I've only been here now 9 months. I hope to be able to make a contribution so that this blurriness becomes there's more clarity in the vision that both the peoples of both countries have about each other, more knowledge about each other, and more affection about each other. And this is, again, something where I think the youth have a very important role to play, because it is with their energy, with their curiosity, with their ambition, that we can do more. to bring our people-to-people contacts and have them, get to know each other much better, and therefore improve the relationship that we have between our two countries. And one thing that was specifically mentioned, we do have some programs of cooperation, academic cooperation between Mexico and India. Last year, during the Guadalajara Book Fair that I mentioned at the beginning, there was also the first ever meeting of university presidents of Mexico and India that took place also in Guadalajara in the margins of the book fair. And out of that meeting, which will probably have a second edition in India next year, in 2021, we hope that a larger flow of both students and professors, as well as publications and research and all sorts of things, can happen between both countries. This is something that we're working on, but we have to take the first step, which is to have the formal contact between the academic institutions, the institutions of higher learning, so that they know each other better, they know what they're doing and how they can best work together to collaborate and improve the relationship that they have with each other.
Very good. Let me just mention in passing, for our audience, that I would like to say that Indian studies in Mexico are very well developed, especially in Colegio de Mexico.
Yes.
And also in the UNAM, no? And I always say that Mexico is the Spanish-speaking country where the studies of Indology and Sanskrit are most developed, even more than Spain. That's a reality. You have great scholars there, and it's a matter of pride, to have inside the Spanish-speaking country such important. One very short question, and I hope you will answer also shortly before moving ahead. And we are, and this question is from Mitali Gavi, New Delhi. I think she's been a student of Cervantes. And the question is, what is the best similarity you personally find within Mexico and India? Do share about it. What is the thing that you find most in common between?
Interestingly enough, and I have a short answer, the color. We're tremendously colorful countries in the way we dress, in the way, the houses are painted, in everything. It's, we both are very, very colorful people in every possible way. And I cannot think of any other peoples as a whole that are as colorful as we are.
That was a very good answer. It was not the Chile. The Chile.
The Chiles, of course, that's also a contribution. Our foods are also, it's a very important issue that we share with each other. Yeah.
Very good. So since we are in food, let's take another question, a quick one also. And this is from, one second, this is from this is from Lavina from Delhi. She's a writer on wine and food and travel. So he's writing about food. And to cut the question short, she says that that perhaps Mexican food is not as well marketed in India as Italian and Chinese. What do you think it can be done to promote Mexican cuisine in India other than just Tex-Mex?
Well, we certainly hope that what we're going to promote is not Tex-Mex, as important as Tex-Mex food is, as a different type of cuisine. But she's absolutely right. I mean, there's no. I mean, I cannot think of a good Mexican restaurant here in India. And actually, we just very recently, something very sad happened, that there was a chef that was working in a restaurant here, a Mexican chef that was working in a restaurant, and because of the restaurants being closed, this was in a mall here in Delhi, he had to go back to Mexico. So we were very sad to see him go. We helped him get, find a flight to get back to Mexico, but this we did very reluctantly because we would have loved for him to stay here. But we definitely need to do much more of that. we also had a food festival. I think if you know, now my memory is so good with this past 80 days being locked up here, but I think it was in February that we had a food festival. We had a chef that was also here from Mexico, and she was a woman chef who was going to be touring throughout India in different hotels and cooking and what, but also had to cut short the tour and to go back to Mexico because of the pandemic. But we hope to do much more of that in the future. And you know, if she's a writer on wines, I think it's very important to know that you know, it's very difficult to get Mexican wines to come all the way here to India, but we have very good Mexican wines in Mexico. One of them, Cabernet Sauvignon, just won a very important prize, French prize, as the best Cabernet Sauvignon in the world. So we're very happy, and you know, hopefully we'll be able to get some of that here. And another aspect which has to do with food is that there is a growing consumption of tequila here in India. I'm very happy to see that. And now also they're beginning to import mezcal, which is another drink in the overall general family of the tequilas. And so, you know, we have sayings in Mexico about how drinking these drinks makes us all happy. So we hope that we can contribute to the happiness of the Indian people by having them drink tequila and mezcal.
Very good. I mean, we are running short of time, and there are many questions, but I will make a quick selection of questions. Our time is approaching, and
Yes.
and what I would like to say, this is a question from Smita Sahey. I think she's from Delhi, and it concerns Cinepolis, which a Mexican brand of cinema. I don't know if it is the Bollywood of Mexico, and cinema houses has recently invested in many large cities of India. And how do you think Cinepolis is handling the lack of business due to the pandemic? Can you elaborate on Cinepolis and what's going on in India with Cinepolis?
Yeah, it's a very good question. As you know, as I said at the beginning, when we talked about the Mexican investments here in India, Cinepolis is one of them. It's a very important one, actually. They run cinema houses in India, and I think it's the largest. The third largest cinema house chain in India. And of course, you know, in Mexico, they're tremendously important, and in other parts of the world. Also, I believe they're also in Spain. Of course, they've been shut down this past 3 months, and it's not. You know, I think that I'm sure that they have done a lot of thinking as to how they're going to move on. What is going to be the so-called new normal once movie houses reopen in the future. I saw a photograph not too long ago of a movie house in Germany that actually had all the seats somewhat separated so that to keep social distance. So maybe they're going to do something like that. But I don't know yet exactly how they're going to do it. But I'm sure that they will do it, and I'm sure that all of us, you know, are very eager to go back to movie houses as well as restaurants and other activities. Taking all the necessary precautions, of course, but that is something that we will have to learn to live with.
Very good. Let me just mention you, which is striking me, you know, that there are several questions. People like Java Singh, which is a lecturer from Doon University, and people like Subho Broto from Gujarat, which have a lot of interest in pre-Columbian, you know, in Mexican languages. They are asking, and you don't have to answer now in a specific way, but just I wanted to tell you, you know, that we have this interest here in learning Nahuatl and about comparisons between Maya mythology and Indian one. I think some of the Hispanics here at the universities, they know there have been several theses written about, you know, about the mythology of Mexico and India. And I just wanted to tell you that there is this interest there, and people are manifesting it through
That's excellent. Very good. Yeah,
and
great.
I put just two questions more. One is also from Subo Broto, and we will be finishing. This is a very particular one, because it concerns a change between students of India and Mexico, and is asking about what are the possibilities of having a better connectivity between New Delhi and Ciudad de Mexico. Do we could have a direct flight like we have with New York, Mumbai and New York, no? And so that's a question also, and we will have in any near future a better connectivity between India
Well, I
and
think
Mexico.
we were working on better connectivity, but not a direct flight, because I think that even though I think that technically it's possible, it may be possible. I'm not exactly sure. I mean, a flight from Delhi or Mumbai to Mexico City. I'm not exactly sure how many hours we're talking about, but it's certainly over 18 or something like that. So I'm not sure that that is still something that is feasible, but we're working on creating better connectivity between Air India and Aeromexico, the Mexican airline, so that people from India who were going to Mexico, making a connection in a European city, could make sort of like a co-share with the Mexican airline to make it more fluid and easier, the transit in whichever airport this was being done. And this is something, of course, that we will have to take up again once commercial aviation returns back to some kind of normalcy. But unfortunately, for the time being, a direct flight, I don't think it's a feasible thing.
Okay. I take the last question. Yeah.
Yes.
So sorry, you wanted to say, Ambassador?
No, I said, I mean, it's unfortunate, but it's, I mean, the realities of distance right now are still that.
I want to take the last question and see the wonder of this new era, which are now, because it's a question that comes from Brussels. So they are watching us from Brussels, and it's for
Great.
Julie. It's a very interesting question. I don't know if you can answer it because it's quite, and it's saying that it's also related to one question that keeps all the time coming here in general terms, which is, and well, let's leave it perhaps an answer or just suggest, no, that our relations are going to be very much affected by the pandemic, and that we will be talking a lot through this kind of media, no, which is webinars and all this. Although I hope that we will combine both things. No, there are several questions regarding that, no, which will be difficult to put. But Julia from Brussels is saying, we all know traditional public diplomacy has been growingly transforming in the last year, making social media, experience sharing and relationship building through virtual channels a must to stay visible and relevant with the general public and not only. I think Mexico is doing a great job on this side in India, very visual, very present and very engaging. My question to the ambassador would relate more to the great several Mexican and Latin American bloggers in Mexico and the role of bloggers in this unofficial public diplomacy, as they are raising so much the visibility and awareness of their country. How is the embassy approaching and integrating? It's a very interesting question, a very relevant, because there is a lot of movement in blogging. Perhaps you are not always well aware, and basically say, and what is the embassy doing regarding this new kind of diplomacy through blogging and social media?
No, well, I think, no, it is certainly, it's a very interesting question. We have tried, and we are trying as much as possible to increase our presence in the social media. But to be very honest, actually, we have not taken the very serious steps when it comes to bloggers, but I think this is, I will certainly move in that direction after listening to this question, because I was not quite aware that about the world of bloggers is still somewhat of a mystery to me. But yes, but nevertheless, I mean, in the embassy here in Delhi, we have tried as much as possible to have a greater presence in social media, in Twitter, of course. India being one of the largest, the Indian people having one of the largest presence in Twitter. We have used it very effectively, I think, in this past 3 months of the pandemic, to inform our people, to the Mexicans that were stranded all over India, to keep them informed of the regulations that were being applied and the things that were going on, and how the embassy could help them or serve their interests. And I think that was very important. So we really have increased very much our presence, making ourselves more visible. But I will look into this blogger aspect, which I think also can be very interesting, a very good opportunity there.
Very good. She just made a clarification saying that it was referring to Mexican bloggers in India. So you think you have some Mexican
bloggers in India?
In India. Well, yeah, just put it in the, let's see, And well, we must conclude here. Thanks very much, Ambassador.
Thank you.
Thank you for being available. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to get in touch with the young people of India. I think we learn a lot from them, the things that are going on. And I really appreciate, because it's a unique opportunity to know better your country and to make yourself accessible to young people of this wonderful country that is India. Please stay with us. I would like to remind you that next Thursday, 18 June, we'll have the Ambassador of Spain with us. Please, and be with us. And thank you very much to all of you for sharing this wonderful conversation with the Ambassador. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Hasta pronto.
Hasta pronto.